Welcome everyone to the latest episode of The Growth Show. I am delighted today that we have got an incredible person, Lauren Lindsay, with us, people manager at Bit Zesty, and also we've mixed it up within The Growth Show. We've got Elvira joining us today as well, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Lauren, thank you ever so much for joining us. I hear you're up in a snowy Glasgow at the moment.
Yeah, I am. So thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to be here. It's my first podcast, so go easy on me. I am in Glasgow just now, and we've got a lot of snow and ice, and it feels like -9. So I'm very happy to be doing this on a Friday morning to take the edge off it all.
Yeah, a lot of fun. It should be fun. Well, I mean, without sort of further ado, just tell us a little bit about you, a bit about your background, what you're up to at the moment, how lockdown's been, all the rest of it.
Yeah, of course. So I've been working in talent for almost 10 years now. It's flown past, and I started in agency. So I worked for a recruitment agency, and it was just such a great introduction to that space because you had this, this privilege of recruiting on behalf of all different types of companies. We had startups, we had one-man bands, and then right through to your, multinationals, and a lot of charities as well. So it was a good way to get to know all the ins and outs of recruitment from that perspective. And then over the last few years, I've kind of transitioned into more of an in-house role where my job is to look at that talent strategy and how that ties into the overall commercial strategy, looking at things like culture, employee engagement, and a lot more to do with wellbeing recently. So it's been such an exciting place to work in for the last couple of years. There's been a lot of change.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely has, and obviously, the pressures now of what's going on in the current climate with COVID, Brexit, whatever else. What are you seeing from organisations in terms of that talent strategy, that talent direction, and how they're sort of managing this process?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and obviously it's been such a a rough time for everyone in a myriad of different ways. I think from an HR talent point of view, the good thing to come out of it is the fact that a lot of what we were promoting and kind of harping on about over the years has become very much front and center. So, that focus of looking after your people first, of checking that they're happy, they're engaged, they are feeling, well, both mentally and physically at work, has become really essential to business strategies, and also that connectedness with what the overall company is trying to achieve. So that culture piece, those values, that mission, these are all things that I think have become a lot more pivotal to how successful businesses can be, especially in these changing circumstances.
And on that, what are you seeing at the moment that certain companies might be doing really, really well? Like any tips for people out there of like, have you thought about this, or have you tried that? Because I think people are always looking and wanting to learn around, okay, how can we engage our people better, motivate our people better?
Yeah, I think the first thing that has kind of come out of all this is that communication piece. So, when businesses are going through hard times, it's really natural to want to minimize that impact it has on staff, and maybe, kind of keep it close to your chest and not give too much away, because obviously you don't want to worry people and you don't want to give them any more stress. But I think because there's just been so much uncertainty, that the best thing that businesses have done over the last 12 months has just been really open and honest with people and allowed them to share, their insights on what's happening, what the business is facing, what changes may be coming down the line. And I think that's always a lot better for staff to actually have that, that trust with their management, that if something's going to happen, you're going to know about it, and it's hopefully not going to be, out of the blue or a big shock to the system. So I think over the last 12 months, there's been a lot more communication with staff. And I think that's only a good thing, both from, the business point of view, but also from the well-being and how connected people feel to the company.
Yeah, definitely. And what about some of the challenges that maybe you're hearing coming out of some of these organizations and people at the moment? Like what are the sort of things that they're wrestling with at the moment?
Yeah, so there's a few. The first I would say is the kind of disconnectedness. So, we're all at home. We don't have a lot that we can do out with our four walls. We are very much confined to speaking to people through, your screen on your laptop. And I think both business leaders and staff themselves are struggling to have that, that kind of sense of purpose, that connectedness to everyone else that they work with, what the business is going through, and really feel still part of the team. When you lose those, physical office environments, and you're used to having lunch with people and, passing conversations, drinks after work on a Friday, you've got that real sense of camaraderie and, that kind of team mindset. But when you feel a lot more isolated, it can be hard to still enjoy your work and find that kind of meaningful connection. So I think that's definitely something that people are struggling with now.
And are you finding that as a result of that, that's sort of eroding company culture? Like, how you've like, what's your experience so far out there, just in terms of how they're maintaining that, how they're building on that company culture, or equally how these times are eroding that, and what are the things that people can be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think companies that perhaps didn't have a strong culture are certainly feeling that erosion now. I think that, I would always encourage people to make sure that they are trying to cultivate that sense of purpose and connectedness in the workplace. And now more than ever, that has to very much be adapted to how do you do that in an online setting. So, we're doing a lot of work just now around creating a sense of shared experience. So, what can we all do together over the course of the week that keeps us feeling as though we're part of one big thing? And that can be, a lot around perhaps creating like team rituals. So, what do we do on a Monday morning? Do we all have a coffee and chat about our weekends? What do we do midweek? Do we do a fitness class together online? What do we do on a Friday? Do we do a kind of wash up session? Do we all get in a meeting and chat and just try to still give a time and place for that social time that staff ultimately don't have as much of now?
Elvira, any question, any thoughts your side?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Lauren, from a recruitment perspective, because obviously you have a lot of experience on this space. How is the job of the recruitment teams changed, and what are the biggest challenges you're facing, or the people in recruitment are facing?
So there's been a few. The first of which I think is the fact that it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. We've got lots of candidates now, basically. So sadly, there's been so many people, that have lost their jobs, have lost, their whole industry sector, are maybe doing a bit of a career pivot or a career change. Even people who simply have taken a step back from the hustle and bustle of working life and now are reprioritizing what they want from both their job and their career. So we're seeing a lot more movement in the market when it comes to candidates. However, the hard part of that is when I'm getting applications through, there are people that are just really in such hard circumstances, financially, emotionally, mentally, and to not be able to give everyone a job is quite hard for a recruiter. I think, sometimes you get cover letters that are quite personal, or you get phone calls when you're going through the feedback process that are just quite hard to deliver. And I think that, giving feedback and making sure that process is really open for the candidate is the best we can do just now. But it definitely does take its toll, from a recruitment point of view, because it's not nice to hear how hard it's been for some people.
Yeah, I can imagine. Lauren, do you think that remote working will influence the hiring process in the future? Like, it will change the profile that companies are looking for now?
Yeah, I think so. I think logistically it's definitely changed. So we're looking at things like, you can't meet with your new employees anymore. So how do you make sure that you still can assess them? How do you train your hiring managers to be more of an effective interviewer in a video call context? I've seen a lot more companies using psychometrics, behavioral profiling, even cognitive testing, which can be helpful, but that I think there's kind of pros and cons to that methodology. And then certainly from a recruitment point of view, the actual onboarding. So we're now at a point where you have to just send someone a laptop and a phone and hope that their setup goes well. So we're looking at stuff like more kind of branded merchandise to make them really feel part of the business, whether that's a coffee cup or a jumper. Even things like getting their desk assessments done, so making sure that their work environment, whatever that may be, is going to be safe and comfortable for them. So I think, the remote working and how that affects recruitment, the whole process has been ripped up and changed.
And Lauren, do you think that, just building on Elvira's question, do you think that's going to be something that's here to stay? Like, is all the mood music you're hearing now, basically it's going to be a necessity, like people are going to need to work 2 days from home, 3 days in the office or something like that? Are you seeing that as a cast iron change for the future?
Yeah, very much so. I think that, the consensus seems to be that I don't think anyone wants to go back to working 5 days in an office, the 9 to 5, the commute. I think that very much staff and, business leaders themselves have benefited from having this more balanced approach to their other priorities. I've seen a lot of managers who I've always thought were very close to burnout over the years, and now they're out, running first thing in the morning and doing their yoga on lunchtime and cooking these really healthy home cooked dinners, whereas before they weren't getting home till 8 or 9 at night. So I think that part of what we've learned over the last year should absolutely stay with us. But at the same time, I know that people are really missing, seeing their colleagues and working with their teams and having that kind of level of communication and relationship in real life. So I think it will be a blended approach going forwards.
What does that mean from the, one of the things we love sort of talking around at Optimus is all around the sort of teams, culture, values, principles. Like, is that, like, what are you hearing in terms of the mood music at the moment as to whether that's a positive or a negative for some of these companies looking forward? Like, are they feeling positive and vibrant, and how are they sort of tackling that to make sure that the cultures and principles are embedded in within their people, or are they nervous about it?
I think a mixture, but I think overall it's definitely something that, people are starting to embrace. I think that we've done the hard part. We've been through the very sudden and extreme change of how we perceive our working lives. So I think moving forwards, once things start to hopefully, get slightly more back to normal, businesses have really got this opportunity to take all the time and all the kind of hopefully more strategic thinking that's been done over the course of the last 12 months and put that into their people strategy going forward. So really cementing down that culture, looking at those values. I work with a lot of companies who have value sets that were developed, like 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they simply don't resonate with the staff. They're not meaningful, they don't empower people, they aren't values that people strive to uphold. So even just looking at how fundamentally, the ethos of the company has evolved should feed into these conversations. So I think that, yeah, with any change, there's an element of nervousness, but overall, there are so many good things that people can take away from this time.
Elvira, before you dive in with a question, because I know Elvira, she's probably got loads at the other end. I just want to pick up on one thing that you said a little bit ago, Lauren, which is around diagnostic testing and stuff. And we love talking around sort of talent ID and how you sort of nurture and grow, cultivate talent. So, and you were sort of hesitant to say, like, oh, I totally support these, but they're moving into the sort of search recruitment space. So what are the pros, what are the cons of some of these diagnostic tools? Which ones have you seen? Which ones do you like? Which ones do you not like? I'd love to get a bit of insight into that.
Yeah, and it's a topic I really enjoy speaking about, actually. So over the years, I've used a few different types of psychometrics. So I've used the DISC profiling, which is the most common one, sometimes known as WAVE, and it measures, various kind of characteristics and what your natural working styles are. I've used one that was more about your kind of self-concept and then how you adjust that in a work setting, so your work mask, and then also something that tested for your dark side behaviors. So basically the behaviors that you exhibit when you're under more pressure or stress. And then more recently, I've been looking at things like cognitive testing, which, for lack of a better comparison, is an IQ test.
Yeah.
Well, I think these are, I do love bringing an element of science and almost, probably like impartiality to a recruitment process, because it means that you're not only relying on what someone has written on their CV and how they come across an interview, which, some candidates are great at and some really struggle with. So it's not always a fair representation of their skill set. However, I think that because you give businesses these insights, hiring managers can become very reliant on them. So suddenly they don't want anyone in their team that's not got an IQ of, whatever the benchmark is. Suddenly they only want to recruit this certain behavioural profile for a job. If they see the word, anxious on a dark side behaviour, that candidate's a no. So I think that these psychometrics are good to perhaps give another facet of information to a recruitment process, but I wouldn't use them as a deciding factor.
And how do you help the current sort of remove the client remove those sorts of biases from that? You know, you just mentioned if they see the word anxious on their profile, it's like, what do you do to try and sort of frame that and help them understand and recognize that actually a blend of different people is probably a better thing than all the sort of one homogenous group?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You know, any kind of executive coach or anything like that will always tell you that, you know, you want a blend of people, you want different perspectives and strengths and skill sets. You don't want this, you know, kind of robotic workforce where they all conform to one profile. So to try and get hiring managers to stay away from that, I think it's really important to use these in the latter stages of recruitment. They should never be used as a way to definitively rule people in or out. I would bring psychometrics and this type of profiling into maybe a final stage. So say you've got two candidates who are both great, but in slightly different ways. You could use a psychometric profile just to give you a little bit more insight as to how they might adjust or adapt to the role. And I think actually the way that psychometrics can be used to the most benefit is actually when you've already onboarded staff. So using psychometrics to work out, you know, who your future leaders are going to be, what development areas certain staff need, how you should communicate or manage, you know, your employees. That's where you'll get the real value from. So for me, they're great, but I would use them, you know, much further into the process.
I'm just intrigued by this dark side one. I want to know what this brings up. I mean, what sort of stuff, Elvira? I mean, I dread to think, you know, how we'd fare on our dark side test. But what does it do? Does it how does it understand how you'd react under pressure? I mean, I'm not expecting you to understand the diagnostic, but I'm intrigued.
Honestly, I've got no idea. I honestly don't have much of a handle on the science behind these things, other than, you know, I think that they certainly all the ones that I've done for me, they've always been very accurate. So I do have some faith. But I remember that, you know, my dark side behavior is that basically if I become overwhelmed, I'll become like quite dramatic about the whole thing, and then I'll lose the ability to make really good decisive decisions. So I think that you have to just embrace these things. You know, nobody handles pressure or stress in, you know, a perfect way all the time. So I think just having that awareness of, okay, you know, yeah, that is me, is just such a valuable piece of information for both you and maybe your manager.
Yeah, really good point. So we talk a lot around self-awareness and stuff like that. So and actually people's ability to sort of recognize and listen to you know, I don't know, personal feedback, if you like, in inverted commas. But did that land and resonate well with you, and did you relate to it, or were you sort of like, what's this talking about, or how did that make you feel, kind of thing? Because I always think these diagnostic tools can either, you know, can be brilliant in one sense and obviously disastrous in another.
Yeah, I think because I've found them all so accurate so far, you know, from the hopefully the strengths and, you know, the good bits about my natural kind of working styles, that you take the dark side or the negatives with a pinch of salt. You know, you're not the perfect employee or staff member, so it's good to just have that full picture of yourself, and it, you know, it gives you some goals to work on and some behaviours maybe to be mindful of. And I think that's what's really fab about having them as part of the business. So I've worked in businesses where, you know, all staff get their behavioural profile, and they actually get like a little placard, and it says, you know, I'm the sort of person that loves to talk things through, or conversely, I'm the sort of person that likes to take a minute and sit quietly and think back, or I'm the sort of person that loves to take a lead role, or I'm the sort of person that prefers to be led. So you actually start to then understand how your colleagues work, how your manager works, and it really helps you adapt how you have these working relationships with them.
Yeah, Elvira, I've got loads of questions, but I appreciate I'm hogging the mic. So anything from your side, you go. You can silence me.
I actually have a couple of questions about that, because I agree with you that it should be something done farther down the line, even when the people is already working on the company, because how reliable they really are before on the hiring process. Like, how much people lie on these things, or they think, oh, this is what the company wants to hear, so this is what I'm gonna say.
Look at Elvira, she's opening up a can of worms already. I love it. How many people do you find don't tell the truth, Lauren, with their recruitment process?
Yeah, I think that think there's an element of that in any part of the recruitment process. So it's a shame because psychometrics are such a beneficial tool, if you do use them honestly. And it's sad to think that people would have that pressure of, oh, I better say, X to this or whatever to try and get the job. Because ultimately, it doesn't really do you any favors. But it's the same as, in interviews. Sometimes people talk up things that they've done in the past or on their CV, perhaps, certain details aren't entirely accurate. So yeah, I think it's just one of those things that people have to just try and maybe feel a bit more comfortable with. You are who you are, you've done what you've done. Just try and embrace that and make the most of it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't really see the value to do this test once the people is on the company, because it can help to build great teams, collaborate together, work together. But on the hiring process, it's just, as you say, and now with so many people unemployed, like they're just gonna say whatever they think the company wants to hear, I guess.
So Lauren, what one thing I've got that's burning in the back of my brain is sort of, when you're approaching the the organization or the client, if you like, and you're trying to sort of hire talent, how do you sort of go about identifying the values, the principles, the environment, if you like, of that particular team or client, and then how do you sort of go through the process of making sure that the candidate fits within that environment? Like, is there any particular process science that you go through that really helps you, make sure that it's the best fit kind of thing?
I think that part of it is still something that people are doing a lot of work on. So in terms of determining,
you can't give all the trade secrets, as you're saying. I can't give it all away.
Yeah, I think that is something that's becoming more of a focal point. So, when we're talking to candidates, they ask a lot of questions about the culture, more so than career progression or the benefits package. So it's becoming something that is very important to current candidates, but also I certainly think from a generational point of view, you've got a lot more people these days that want to feel at home when they're part of a company. So in terms of identifying what the culture or values are or should be, I like to actually just speak to all the staff that currently work there. So if I'm in-house, I do have these one-to-ones and I say, how would you describe the culture? Because no one's going to know better than the people who are actually, part of that culture. Sometimes you get senior leaders who have developed, a culture or a value set that they promote that is either completely aspirational or is something that they think their clients will want to hear. And really your culture is completely born out of the people that inhabit it. So I speak to the staff and I get them to tell me, what does it feel like? What are the strengths? What do we need to work on? And from that, you can get a much better handle on what does it feel like to be part of that company.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. One thing you've mentioned a couple of times is around focus on people's strengths. So is there any things that you do around identifying super strengths of people or of yourself? Like, what any insight into that?
Yeah, so something that I have been looking at more recently is job tailoring. And job tailoring is about taking, a fairly generic role profile, so say that of a recruiter, and then making it more tailored to that individual's strengths or preferences or what they really enjoy. So me as a recruiter, I love the people side of it. So I really love going to the meetings and working with stakeholders and candidates in all forms of interviews. So for me to get the most satisfaction out of that job, those are the areas that I would hopefully be allowed to focus in. However, you will get other recruiters who love the more kind of like reporting side of it. So they like looking at things like, how many vacancies do we need to fill? What time period do we need to fill those over? How do we resource plan for that? How do we make sure we've got the right number of candidates to then convert into the right number of hires? And they look at it on a more kind of not mathematical, but you know what I mean, like a kind of practical sense. So job tailoring is very much about looking at what people are good at, what they enjoy, and then shaping the roles to almost like, kind of maximize their potential in that. And I think that we are so used to, assuming that just because someone's got a job title, then their job has to look exactly the same as everyone else that holds that. And actually, that's not the fairest way to get the most out of your staff.
Yeah, definitely. What are the super strengths that you're sort of seeing everyone needing at the moment in the market? And is there a gap is there a dearth of talent at all? Are you seeing anything like that? So 2 questions there, but any thoughts on that?
I think that in terms of talent that's in demand, it's always going to be tech, I think, is the answer to that. There's so many exciting things happening in technology, and the way that we apply it in every industry now is just such a great place to be in. So I think that if you talk about an industry that's not only doing really well, but is also quite challenging to work in, it's recruiting technical talent, and so all your developers and things like that. From a more kind of soft skill point of view, I think that I want to say resilience, because obviously, over the last 12 months, it's been tough on absolutely everybody. And I think that companies are now starting to invest more in building up that resilience skill in their staff and in their leaders. So when things don't go to plan, or, something challenging happens to the team or the business, it's about how do you bounce back from that? Obviously it'll hit you and it'll get you down, but how do we make sure that that is something that you can benefit from and ultimately come back from?
And what about you, Lauren? What about your own environment, or or in the sort of services that you provide? What's the best team that you've ever been involved in? What do they do? How does it feel? Like, can you give any sort of personal insights into that at all?
Yeah, so I've honestly been so lucky. I don't think there's ever been like a job or team that I've been part of that, there's not been something amazing that they've done. So my first job working in agency, it was very much a sales culture. So it was that work hard, play hard mindset. So you were, some nights you'd be in the office till God knows when, and even weekends on occasion. But we had such a good team culture. So, we went to the races, we went for drinks, we did like cocktail making classes, we went out for lunch almost every day, we brought in each other coffees first thing in the morning. So you really, as much as you were maxed out sometimes in terms of the actual work, you just had such a laugh the whole day with the people that you worked with. After that, I worked for a company that had really strong values, and it was my first experience of a company that really, you couldn't get away from these values. They were in their recruitment process, they were in their performance reviews, they were, all over every process that the company had. And it was nice to actually experience what powerful values can do, because all of a sudden you find yourself, trying to uphold them and trying to demonstrate them, and they very much become part of your mindset for that business. So I think that's the other thing that can really help elevate, a team or a company.
Just on that, you're talking about, well, which one do you enjoy more, and which one do you feel is more effective, and why, around the sort of like process driven, maybe a bit more organized and structured framework stuff, and the freestyle, let's all go buy each other coffees, and and be a bit more sort of like fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing, but it's all around clubbing together and pulling in the same directions. Which one do you prefer, and do you think that one is, can they operate harmoniously, or do they need to sort of be complemented by one another?
So I think that the kind of fun team, vibe on a day-to-day basis is what will make a job that you don't enjoy that much enjoyable. So it's your kind of short term, if you love the people you work with, even if the job isn't exactly what you want to be doing, you will still get that kind of daily enjoyment out of it, and it will become, hopefully a lot more bearable. However, I think the kind of bigger picture, the framework stuff, so the, what is my job actually doing, what values of mine align with my company's goals, what is the meaning behind my job, that's the stuff that will keep you with a business long term. So if you've got that, even if the people you work with change, as they naturally will, if you've got that real sense of purpose and connection to your job and to your company, that's what will give you that stability in your staff force. So, I think it's definitely great to try and have, the fun stuff, but that will only last for so long.
Yeah, true. Elvira, any thoughts?
I was thinking about that, and obviously, as you said, on teams, it's really important to have that connection, and and if you are happy with the people you are working with, I think it will affect performance as well. But how do you think can companies like simulate this on the working from home situation? Because obviously now we don't go to the office, we don't talk to these people that much, or we don't go for a beer after that. So how can companies simulate all these relationships on a remote working situation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's definitely something that companies have spent a lot of time trying to work out how do we do this now. So in my experience, you've got to have a bit of fun with it, because that is what people are missing, is that, you know, that kind of casual talking to people, you know, in the office, around the office, after work, just really having those kind of social connections and, you know, having a laugh. So I think that you have to be very mindful in making sure that people still have this as part of their day. So whether it is consciously making sure that, you know, managers have catch-ups with their staff, but it's social. It's about how are you coping with lockdown, and what are you going to try and plan for this weekend. Not just about, you know, where are you with that project that needs to be delivered. And equally, I think that staff themselves, we now have to go out our way to, you know, instant message someone, or, you know, say if you get time for a quick chat. And again, just really consciously have that time with people, because ultimately you're not going to get it by accident anymore. I've seen companies do like amazing things where, you know, they're all doing maybe like a running challenge together, so they've still got that sense of we're all doing this as part of a team, even though we're not physically together. We've had things like, you know, my company just now, we did charades, we do Pictionary, you know, there's a lot of like things that you can do online that are still fun and still let your staff have a bit of social time together. So I think the key is just to be a little bit, you know, kind of creative with it. Ask the staff what they want to do. Ultimately, you know, they're your best source of inspiration.
Lauren, what about leadership? What are you seeing from, well, what's your view on leadership in general, and what are you seeing the great leaders doing at the moment in the market, and what are the bad ones doing?
Okay, so I think overall this has been a good thing for leadership. I love people in leadership positions. You know, I really like kind of working with senior stakeholders to try and enhance their business and their culture and their talent strategies. So I think that the last kind of 12 months has been good for a lot of senior leaders who tend to be, you know, the people that are maybe first in, last out, the people that are very invested in their company and their business growth, the people that, you know, love being around, you know, a full boardroom of staff, or giving kind of, you know, big company updates. So they've lost all that, but I think that what they've gained is hopefully, you know, a better balance. You know, they're hopefully getting, you know, good sleep and healthy habits, and spending more time with their families, or devoted to exercise and health. So I think overall that'll make them better leaders. And the main thing that being away from an office hopefully has given them is time to think more strategically. So often, you know, if you've been in any kind of management or senior position, your day is very much spent putting out fires. You know, you're dragged from one meeting to another. You know, people are constantly coming up to you with issues or things that are going slightly awry. So now, because you can't have that, you know, that kind of off the cuff communication with people, you have got this chance to really take a step back, think about yourself, but also think about where are we all going, what are we wanting to achieve with this. So I think that, you know, hopefully if we balance remote working with being in the office in future, a lot of leaders will benefit from that mixture.
And what are the best ones doing towards their people and stuff that you're seeing? Like how are they reacting, responding to the, you know, the current situation, whether that's in, well, what are you doing in your business, and equally what are you seeing in other, you know, other businesses where there's really good leadership? What does that look like? What does that feel like?
So the best thing that I've seen leaders doing, and it's something that we've amplified in my current place, is communication. So being a lot more transparent, but also having, you know, more regular communications with staff. So whether that's a weekly update, whether that's, you know, town halls, company-wide meetings like once a month, it's really just making sure that you're not taking advantage of not being in an office to hide things that are happening in the business that you just maybe don't want to shed light on. So obviously a lot of companies have gone through restructures or redundancies, and these aren't pleasant, but I think the worst thing you can do is not be open about what's happening and how that might affect staff. So the communication piece, I think, is key, and great leaders are really taking this time to make sure that they've got a good kind of internal strategy in place. The second thing that great leaders are doing is treating people like people. So, you know, everybody's going through a bit of a tough time just now. I think that the best leaders are still making sure that they are they are conscious of that they are being maybe a bit more flexible with people than they have been previously. So, you know, working hours, does it have to be 9-5 anymore? You know, if someone needs to take a bit longer on their lunch break because they want to fit in a 5K, then, you know, let them. If somebody's just maybe going through a bit of a hard time just now, you know, can we get support services in place? Can we give them a bit of, you know, time off, whatever they need to rest and recharge? I've seen companies going down to like, you know, 4 days for their working week, giving staff, you know, randomly long weekends, making the annual leave allowance, you know, exponential, just unlimited leave. And they're doing all these things because they recognize that, you know, your workforce aren't just numbers. There are people that are going through a challenging time just as much as you are, and you have to make, you know, considerations for that.
Empathetic leadership, I love it. What do you think that's do you think that's going to stay, or do you think leadership's really struggling with that at the moment? I mean, it sounds from the way you talk that it's sort of commonplace at the moment, but is that the case, or is there a sort of select few? And do you think that, you know, that's the future, and that leaders are going to need to evolve and adapt and flex to that?
So optimistically, I would like to think that, you know,
Yes.
this becomes the new normal. It's really hard to say what will happen when we perhaps can go back to our previous way of working, whether all the behaviours and the changes that we've made to adapt, whether they just start to completely fall away. I hope that they don't, and I kind of also think that staff won't let them now, because, you know, over the last few years we have really opened up that conversation about mental health. Employers are taking a lot more ownership for, you know, how they make sure that their people are healthy, happy and engaged in work. So I kind of feel like, you know, we are too far gone, you know, with these topics and putting these front and centre in strategies to just suddenly forget about them. But yeah, that's the optimist in me.
I love it. Well, everyone's an optimist. We've got to always be an optimist. I mean, it's optimist performance. We bloody love it. So, Elvira, sorry I cut you off. You're going to ask something, so apologies.
Yeah, no worries. I was just reading a couple of days ago that this company, this bank, they were going back to the offices, and the biggest problem they were facing was that the people on the teams were asking, how can we control, or how can we be sure that the people who are still working from home are they doing their jobs? Like you talked before about trust, but we talk about trust from the leaders to the employees. But what about the trust between the team?
Yeah, so this is something that's come up a lot for me over the years. So, you know, in previous companies, I was a very big advocate of flexible working. So by that, I mean that staff don't have to be there for 9 o'clock in the morning. Maybe they start at 8, maybe they come in at 10, and their day flexes around that. And equally building in an element of working from home. So suddenly you had these, you know, these companies where not everybody was in the same place at the same time. And there was this natural apprehension of, well, if I can't see them, how do I know that, you know, that they're working and they're performing as hard as I think they do in real life? And you're absolutely right, Elvira. It does come down to trust. I think that it shouldn't really matter where someone physically is for them to do their job. If you've got staff members who, for whatever reason, aren't performing, you know, they're missing deadlines, quality of work is poor, you know, they're taking really long unnecessary breaks, etc. That's a performance issue. You know, that's not to do with where they are. That's just to do with their work ethic and their delivery. So I think that managers and teams have to be really mindful of that differentiation. You know, that flexible or remote working shouldn't necessarily now mean that people won't perform, and if they do, it's not because of that. You know, maybe there was something already underlying with their performance that now has just become a bit more apparent.
Lauren, can we just drill down a little bit more into that? Because I know you're a massive advocate for flexible working from home, and I'm assuming, I'm making the assumption here that, you know, there's some theory and research and whatever, but so like, can you just elaborate on it a bit more? Because I think it's obviously so relevant and so pertinent now, the benefits of it, and why it's you know, it's now almost a total necessity. It's almost a given. Like, people are expecting it now in the market. So A, why were you such an advocate and champion of it? And then B, what are the benefits? What are you seeing? You know, the pros, the cons, and whatever of that sort of flexible working from home style workforce.
So my own personal experience of flexible working was a fairly kind of stark contrast. So I went from working in an agency where our hours were 8:30 till 6 o'clock at night, and then you had one late night where you worked till 7. And these were just your set hours. So if you had more work to do or you had a deadline to hit, you were in that office until you hit it. So for me, that was the kind of extreme version of office hours. And then after I finished up from that job, I went into a work environment where it was flexi time. And it was flexi time in the sense that as long as you hit your like total number of hours, I think it was 140 hours a month, you could work, as little or as a lot as you wanted over the course of the day. So suddenly I had this huge amount of freedom as to how I managed not only my time in work, but my personal time. So, it was the first time I could actually go to certain gym classes or see friends, for a drink after work, and not have to say it depends if I can get away or not. And I suddenly became the most rested I've ever been. My sleep pattern was a lot better. I stopped leaving work feeling so mentally drained that you can't even see or speak anymore, because I never let it get to that point. If I was working and I felt like, right, I've given all I can give today, you called it a day, you had that empowerment. Whereas before, you were very much there until the clock struck 6. So for me, I just knew that I was performing better, and I felt better, and I really enjoyed the work, and I was able to give more to that. So because of that, when I then went to future companies, if they didn't have it in place, I just felt like they were missing a trick. And it wasn't totally selfish. It wasn't because, I just loved it so much that I now refuse to work anywhere that doesn't have it, which I think some people thought. But yeah, I just, the science and the statistics and all that behind it, the productivity of your staff goes up if you just allow them to have that bit of balance between their home life and their work life. You will find that your staff suddenly, develop all these healthy habits that they just couldn't find a way to schedule in before. And they even are able to fulfill a lot more personal commitments, and obviously that makes them feel more calm and at peace. So yeah, there's loads of statistics about it. We've done surveys, from a before and after point of view, and across the board you're looking at 80, 90, 100% benefit to staff in different ways.
And do you see pushback at all on it? And what is that? But what's the concern, or what would be the issues that people raise around doing it? I mean, I've struggled to understand why they would, but I'm still intrigued. Want to ask the question.
Yeah, so there's always pushback. I think with any concept that seems alien to a company, the natural reaction is to be like, what if it doesn't work out? And to Elvira's point, it's that, what if we start letting people work flexibly or remotely, and they for some reason stop working, they stop performing their job. And as I say, that is definitely a trust thing. Surely you can rely on the people that you have employed to go and do their job from a slightly different place. The second part, which I always think is really interesting, is, but what if we're now not as available to our clients? So, our clients are used to us being there firmly from, 8:30 in the morning till 5:30 at night. What if they now have an emergency and they can't get a hold of us? And I think it's a shame that you would worry about that, because clients are people too, and clients have their own businesses, and hopefully clients care about their staff. So I think it's just a case of managing those expectations that, you're not on call, setting perhaps different core hours. So saying that, definitely between 10 and 4, you will always have people available to you, or simply managing it as a team, that one person, does work late that night just in case something comes up. But 9 times out of 10, the clients are absolutely fine.
You mentioned a really important word there, which we hear a lot, which is obviously trust. And we've mentioned it sort of consistently throughout the last sort of hour or however long we've been chatting for. Like, how are you finding trust is being built within teams, organizations at the moment? And equally, how's it being eroded?
In some cases, I think that trust has increased because suddenly you've got these businesses and these managers that have realised that even though all their staff have been working home for the best part of a year, their business is still surviving, and there's still output there, and their clients are still happy. So I think that's been a really pleasant learning curve. We haven't watched all these companies crumble because suddenly we've got remote working in place. I think the erosion of trust comes from when staff take advantage of these situations. And an element of that, I think, is completely natural. You know, I've seen people who have got their pajama bottoms on underneath, or they've got a washing, you know, going on in the background, or, you know, they are doing more kind of fitness classes over the course of the day, and that's fine. I mean, really, you know, that's just people being people. But if you've got a member of staff who, for whatever reason, you know, has logged on but is still asleep by lunchtime, then yeah, that is an issue, and that will scar your managers if they find out about it. But to be honest, I've really not heard of any cases of anything going that badly wrong.
So Lauren, was that your sort of code way of saying you're currently sort of sat in your pajamas? You know, from everything we see, we don't know. The mystery maintains. We love it. So
I made an effort today. I mean, I'm usually like, you know, like joggy bottoms and fluffy socks on, but I promise you I'm fully business attire.
We love it. Amazing. Elvira, any bits, because I'm conscious of time and I don't want to keep Lauren any longer, but any bits, burning questions at your end?
Yeah, I've got one last question, and I know this could be another interview on itself, but I just have to ask. How do you think that remote working or the possibility of remote working, flexible working, will affect equality?
I knew you were going to ask this question, and it's such a hard question. So I've been thinking about it. So I would like to think that equality will improve, as always. I think that, again, over the last couple of years, companies have realised the benefit of having a really diverse workforce. So, you know, historically, companies were very much like, if you don't have a degree and 10 years work experience, then it's a no. Whereas now it's like, you know, we are a lot more open to people from different backgrounds, from, you know, different places, you know, just generally different life experiences. So I hope that remote working continues to make jobs more accessible. You know, obviously we don't have the geographical boundary issue as much. Again, with things like flexible working, it means that different people with different commitments out with work can now hopefully, you know, get jobs that fit around their lives. So generally speaking, I would like to think that equality will continue to improve. The pessimist in me thinks that some people will always or still have, you know, unconscious or conscious bias. Some people are still quite discriminatory and, you know, in certain ways, and that is not something that is just going to vanish because suddenly, you know, we have more remote working or more flexibility. So I think that is still something that has to be addressed. But the good side of all the changes in the last year is that we have fundamentally, you know, altered our perception of work itself. So we no longer think about work as a 9-5 in a, you know, bricks and mortar building. And hopefully because of that, we can now start to reassess and re-examine other things that we take for granted, like what a certain, you know, applicant's background needs to be to get a job, or, you know, how we access talent. So I'm hoping that because people are now a lot more flexible in their mindsets, that things that people maybe have inbuilt into them over the years will now start to, you know, fall away and become a bit more flexible.
It's a brilliant question, Elvira, and I actually love the answers, Lauren. And I mean, just to sort of try and drill a bit deeper into it, if you didn't mind, you know, has the current sort of scenario, if you like, enabled a more diverse workforce, whether that be, you know, BAME or gender or whatever it might be? Are you seeing that at the moment, or is it still sort of just crisis management and no one's even got to that part? Because to your point, now working through a screen, it opens up all sort of possibilities, and it becomes purely about talent, right? It becomes purely about capability, talent, and actually how can you can actually work as flexible as you need to. So, you know, are you seeing anything in that? And if not, what are you seeing as the obstacles or blockers to that? You mentioned bias, but I don't know if there's anything else.
So I think that definitely, you know, diversity and inclusion and equality are now, you know, kind of staples in business strategy and in their policies, and even in, you know, quotas to an extent. So I think that that's definitely something that is becoming, you know, better. However, I don't think it's because of flexible working or remote working. I think that this is something that has been building in momentum, you know, over a number of years. There's so much science and case studies to show that if you have a board, you know, or senior management team or any team that has a lot of diversity in it, it's ultimately going to be a better team, both financially and in terms of performance. So the way that I think it's changed recently is that candidates, as we've mentioned, do care a lot more about the values of the business, and they do care about the culture they're coming into. And something that they're looking for is for employers to show that they embrace and encourage diversity. So I think it's become something that job seekers are more likely to consider. And I've seen a lot more companies recently in their job adverts and on their websites and PR releases that are saying, our board is, 73% female, and, we've got people under 30 on it, or, we've got a BAME statistic in there, or something to just really show that this is part of their strategy and it is something they encourage.
So that's the biggest enabler at the moment. We think it's more bottom up rather than sort of top down driven, if you like. The market is demanding this, and therefore companies need to be responsive. So do you think it is that, or do you think is it that way around, or are companies really now starting to drive it and recognize it themselves, or are they being forced to do it, for want of a better description?
I think it's, honestly, I think it's a mixture. So I think some companies, the best companies are switched on. They see these things, they hear these things, they read about them, they're very attuned to changes, and then they embrace that and they build it into their strategy, and that is the way it should be done. However, on the flip side, I do think some companies are saying, oh, well, our competitors are doing that, so we need to do it. And suddenly you've got these new board members that are all female, or you've got, a few new hires that happen to be, mixed race or from an ethnic minority. And that's not really, diversity and inclusion. That's keeping your statistics up because, it looks good. So I think that there is still a bit of a shift as to whether businesses are doing this because they genuinely, believe that this is a great strategy going forwards, or they're just trying to be competitive.
And in closing, how do you get that authenticity then? Because it feels like it needs to be an authentic change rather than a just keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. So what are your views and perspectives on how you can deliver authentic, diverse, inclusive environments within companies?
I think that you have to have people in, senior or decision-making positions that genuinely believe and advocate for this type of thing. And it's the same as mental health, and it's the same as flexible and remote working. If you've got influential people in your business who feel passionately about these subjects, who, live and breathe these values or these principles, then that will filter into the organization and it won't be superficial. But if you've got, people that are doing it, but, they don't really believe it, it's very easy to pick up and sense that. So I think it's a case of companies very consciously and strategically making sure that you've got these, these people that are bringing these things to life, and it's not just a cursory measure.
I mean, I'll be honest, Lauren, I could sit here and talk for another 4 or 5 hours, but I'm conscious of time. Elvira, anything from your side? Any other questions?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, we could talk for hours, as you said.
Yeah. Or maybe we will. Maybe we'll just, we'll keep Lauren trapped. But we have to bring the show to an end at some point. And so, Lauren, thank you ever so much for being on, part of the Growth Show. You are now officially an optimist as well, Lauren. So you can put that and add that to the many array of brilliant achievements that you've had so far. I think it might rank a little bit lower than some of them. But thank you ever so much for being on the Growth Show. It's been absolutely brilliant, a privilege to have you involved, and we really look forward to sort of touching base more often in the future.
Thank you so much. I've honestly this has been a lovely start to my Friday morning. I was so grateful that you guys invited me on, and it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you both. And, likewise, I think I could, rattle on about all these subjects all day. So hopefully, people enjoy it and it'll be beneficial, but a huge thank you to having me.